Hi, I'm William Shekel from the Chambers Rescue Channel, and today I want to talk to you about the Lorain Red Wheel Thermostat, how to use one, how to calibrate one, a little bit of its history, and where to get one fixed if yours is broken. The Lorain Thermostat was the first gas oven thermostat ever, and it was invented by a guy named Benjamin Meacham, who worked for a subsidiary of the American Stove Company in Lorain County, Ohio. He was in charge of figuring out why stoves were faulty and sent back, and it should be no surprise if you've ever worked tech support or helped your parents with their computers, that the problem wasn't with the device, it was with the person trying to use it. They just didn't know what they were doing. And they blamed impatience, lack of education, but problem's one thing, the solution was something else. He thought there had to be a better way. So in 1913, he developed a prototype for an oven thermostat so you could set a dial to a temperature and the oven would bake consistently at that temperature. He brought it home, installed it on his home kitchen, and his wife used it for the next 18 months and gave him notes. And he tweaked things based on her notes for the next 18 months so that by the end of 1914, the first thermostat was put on an oven and sold. By 1919, the American Stove Company was using Lorain thermostats on every single one of its stoves. The American Stove Company, if you're familiar with my video on the Magic Chef 1000, and this is a Magic Chef 1000 series stove. In 1929, the American Stove Company condensed all 6 of its regional brands of stoves into one brand, Magic Chef, which is still around today. So every Magic Chef you see up until the 40s will have a Lorain thermostat, and even well into the 50s, they still had the red dial. It became a trademark very quickly. Other brands tried later. Once it got popular, they tried to copy this. Some other stove manufacturers used the Lorain wheel. It was a big hit because no longer were you left to the old tricks that your grandmother taught you about, say, heating up the oven and throwing flour in a pan in it and seeing how quickly it turned brown. That was an old trick. Actually, it's an old trick, but it's still used today for baking. And if you have an oven without a thermostat, it's a hint trick to know. But the Meachams made sure that we didn't have to do that. And I'm going to move the camera so that you can see how he designed this wheel. The original Lorain advertisements boasted 44 or 45 temperature settings on their dial. And if you look at them as I turn this, they're not all numbers. Slow, moderate, hot, quick, very hot, and of course, all the way up to broil. These are throwbacks to, not broil obviously, but these are throwbacks to the cookbook you would have had in 1919, or the recipes you had from your mother, from your grandmother. They didn't have thermostats on their ovens, and they probably had coal or wood burning stoves. So they had shorthand for knowing how high the flames were, or knowing the state of the embers, and they had the shorthand of hot or moderate accordingly. So for me, part of the genius of this is the fact that they combined legacy temperatures with this more modern thinking of, let's set it to an actual degree temperature. That pushed forward cookbooks, that pushed forward cooking in general. All of a sudden we could get much more precise and get more replicable results. If you think about think about your life without a temperature setting on your oven, it's tricky if you don't know how. And a lot of people, even back in 1913, didn't know how. So when we look at this, we see that there's a pointer right here. Now this pointer is adjustable so that, let's say you're really short and your eye level's a little lower. This is set for someone a little shorter for me because the client who is getting this is a little shorter than me. But it's designed so that you can look down and the pointer will line up with the temperature, and you calibrate the oven so that your view of this pointing at 350 shows you 350 on an oven thermometer. We'll talk about that process in just a second. I also want to point out, just while we're looking at this body and this refinished dial, this work on this thermostat was done by Rex Bakel at Homestead Vintage Stoves out in Washington. He is the one person I trust to do this work. There are not a lot of people out there who do it at all. And some of the people who can do it only do it for in-house clients. So if your whole stove's getting restored, they do it for them, but they won't let you just send the thermostat in. Rex does that, provides that service, does superb work, and as you know from my other videos, or if you're a first-time viewer, know that no one ever pays me for my opinion. I wish Rex would. That would be great. Rex, I'll give you a call. We can work something out. But I go through a lot of different options until I finally settle on something that cannot be improved upon. Rex's work cannot be improved upon. Not to give him too big a swelled head, but I'll put his email address. Their website is down. I'll put their email address in the screen and in the description, so that if you have one of these and you're a do-it-yourselfer, you can get it rebuilt by him. And yeah, again, superb work. So now let's talk about how this works. So let's take a look at an unrestored Lorain thermostat so you can get an idea about how it works. Whether it was built in 1913 or 1936, they all have this copper tube with a carbon rod inside. Basically what happens is, this is the sensor that sits inside the oven. It gets hot, the carbon rod swells up and expands and pushes a lever that's kind of in here. That lever will pivot to shut off the valve, and how much it has to pivot determines on where you turn the dial. That turns the screw, that moves the fulcrum, and so you're either you're saying that it should take longer to close, or or should be faster to close. That's really all there is to it. Now, for those of you who are really picky like me, you'll notice that this looks different than the one on the stove. The one on the stove that I showed you before that was rebuilt by Rex, this is a Model C. That has an external housing. It sticks out of the stove, has a profile beyond the dial. This, you notice this plate, and here, this is really filthy. I've not cleaned this up at all. This plate would be all you'd see on the wall of your stove, and then the dial would sit right in front of it. So the Model D, and the parts are compatible, the dials are compatible. The C and D are not compatible with the A and B, which are earlier ones, which frankly, I personally have never seen in person. Seen pictures of them. I've seen pictures of them on restored stoves, so I know they're out there. They have not crossed my path yet. So this is a Model D. We've got a Model C on the stove. The calibration is going to be the same. There's one really important thing about all of these, and it affects you as an owner of a Lorain thermostat, especially if you want to convert your stove between natural gas and propane, or either direction, doesn't matter. A thermostat like this has two flames, heat and bypass. Heat is obvious, make it hot in here. Bypass is a much lower flame. It's only 1/8 of an inch high, and it's really just there to keep the burner lit. So that if you open the oven door, if you adjust the temperature, if for any reason the oven needs to kick up to heat again, it's ready. It's on standby. It's on bypass. It'll kick it back up. Now, if you've watched my videos for, say, how to calibrate a chambers stove, you'll know you can adjust the bypass on those thermostats. You cannot do that on a Lorain thermostat. It has what's called a fixed bypass. That means that there is a fitting inside the thermostat that is set for either propane or natural gas. If your thermostat is unrestored, it is very, very, very difficult to open up the area that has that bypass setting, and then you need the right size. This is one of the reasons why it's so important to know who to turn to get parts or to get it rebuilt. This is really one of those leave thinking to the professionals things. When it comes to thermostats, this is not a do-it-yourself project. Calibrating it, absolutely. Repairing it, rebuilding it, just call Rex. It's a lot easier. And the bypass is going to be the thing that really tricks you up if you're just trying to do a simple conversion. If you've watched my how to convert videos, you know that for the most part, all you have to do is switch out one part for each jet and you're good to go. But if you have a fixed bypass thermostat like the Lorain, you need that extra fitting. It's going to be tough to get to, and then how are you going to find it? This is why I'm going to give you his email address. Okay, I want to show you this from a slightly different angle to point out a couple different parts to this. First, you see your carbon rod where your dial goes. You have a gas line in. Here is a gas line out, a skinny one, and here's a big one out. The big one is the gas line that feeds into your burner. And you notice this orifice cap down here. That's what I was just talking about for conversion. If you're converting between one fuel type and another, you're going to probably need to switch that out, especially on a pre-1950s stove. This is the pilot line. It's a lot smaller, only has to have a very small flame. And you can tell it's not actually part of the thermostat. It's just kind of screwed in there through this extra fitting. And there's a tiny little set screw here that allows you to adjust the flame for the height of the pilot. And the pilot is really just there. Again, it's works in parallel with the bypass. It's there to make sure the burner stays lit, and it's there to help assist it kick back up if it needs flame after it's gone down to bypass. And that little screw that you turn it right to decrease the size of the flame and left to increase the size of the flame. It's the same as anything else, right to tight, left to loose. Tightening it up, you're shrinking the size of the flame. On the Model C, you don't have that pilot adjustment. I'm going to show you where that is in just a second. Okay, so let's calibrate your oven with an oven thermometer and your Lorain thermostat. So we're going to start off with a good oven thermometer. By good, I always mean liquid-based. Digital is fine if your door is spring-loaded like this or a modern stove. On a Chambers, it won't work at all because it's a very tightly machined seal and it gets clamped shut. It'll destroy your line. If you have a stove like that with a Lorain, don't use digital. And I never, ever use those round spring-loaded bimetal oven thermometers. They are pre-manufactured garbage. Just toss it out. We're here to discuss accuracy of your oven, and they have nothing to do with accuracy whatsoever. So liquid-based, it's physics. You can't trick physics, and there's no battery to die on you in the middle of your work. So they're $15 on Amazon. Sometimes they're on sale for half that. It's an absolutely worthwhile tool. So good oven thermometer. And then we set the dial to 400 degrees. Now, if you find the original calibration sheet, which honestly isn't that hard to find online. I mean, original, I've never seen it, but the photocopy of it's floating all around. It'll say a different temperature. It'll say, I think, 350 or even 300. I use the instructions that Rex sends with his thermostats to clients. Again, I trust the expert who knows way more about these than I could ever hope to. And if he's saying 400, I'm doing 400. It's also handy because every liquid-based thermostat, you absolutely calibrate at 400 degrees, so it makes life easy. It's just one number to remember. So we set the dial to 400, and we put the oven thermometer in, and we're going to light the oven. All right, so we're going to be looking for two things. Eventually, we're going to be looking for an accurate reading. First thing we're going to do when we light it is we're going to check the height of the flame and we're going to check the height of the pilot. Now remember, this is a fixed bypass, so we can't adjust the height of the bypass flame. The thermostat will only ever have one setting there, and if yours is rebuilt, it is set for the fuel type of your choice. If you want to change the fuel type, you need to change that set fitting. It's an actual part that you will require. And again, that's why I'm putting the email address in so that you can find one. Okay, as part of the thermostat test, this is how I do it when I'm restoring a stove anyway. I put things in piece by piece, test every step along the way. So I took the oven floor out because it really gives you the best view, and it's a lot easier to show you from this direction rather than looking up from the broiler. The broiler is the door right underneath the oven. They share a burner, and we light the oven from the broiler. So I'm going to turn this on. Lights right up. And there's our pilot. And, that's about a 1/2 inch, and that's perfect. That's where we want it. Now, I slipped it out of its housing. It should be right sitting inside this sleeve right here. It's anchored to, that's why this fitting is so oddly shaped, fits like a glove right into this sleeve. So it's anchored to the burner with ports right nearby, so that if this should get low, go too low, try going out, the pilot will light it right back up. So the two things we want to look for while we're here, well, actually there's 3 things we want to look for. First is both flame heights. Flame height on the pilot, flame height on the oven. And then we want to make sure we have as blue a flame as possible on the oven. So first things first, let's adjust the pilot height. So remember that fitting I showed you on the unrestored thermostat? On this model of this Magic Chef 1000, it is right here. It's always going to be really close to the oven handle. If you have a Model D thermostat, it's probably going to be in a trickier place to find. You have to hunt around for it. On that particular one, you needed to go into an access panel inside the oven. It's a different story for a different day. With all American Stove Company stoves, including Magic Chef, they change things with the wind. Sometimes it was just a better idea. Sometimes it was a better part, or just the part they had available that day. I've seen all kinds of variations. Plus, on a 100-year-old stove, you never really know what someone has done between it leaving the factory and getting to you. So, it's better off to explore rather than expect it to be in one exact spot. But I already took the cap off, so this 1/2 inch cover is going to be on there. Get a 1/2 inch wrench, take this off, just screws right off. Exposes the set screw underneath. We're going to take a long screwdriver. Remember, it's right to tight, so it's right to decrease the size of the flame and left to increase the size of the flame. So I'm going to increase it, so it's getting bigger. And you're just making very tiny adjustments. Just over 1/2 inch is where I like to have it, so that it can easily slip out of that sleeve and get right to those ports. And that's a good conduit right in there. And this is open-ended, so the flame just shoots right out. It's nice and easy. So the next thing we want to look for is the flame height. Now, on most stoves from the teens, 20s, and 30s, you do not have an adjustable height mixing pin. I'm about to issue a video I did a long time ago and just realized I never released about how to tell what kind of mixing pin you have. That helps with conversion. It also helps know whether or not your flame is an adjustable height. If you don't, a lot of these caps are sized, meaning it will produce one size flame. This stove happens to be that type, where I know I can't adjust the flame height beyond changing the cap. I'm using the original refurbished cap that came with it, and it's right over there, sticking right into the burner. If it were an adjustable cap, I could grab a wrench. It's either a 1/2 inch or 9/16, 2 different cap sizes, but again, they're universal, and it will universally always be one of them. And if it has an adjustable cap, then what I do is I turn it to the right to decrease the height of the flame, and turn it to the left to increase the height of the flame. This is a fixed cap, one size flame. But if you notice, one of the things we have going on in here is an awfully yellow flame. Okay, so now we want to talk about flame color. Since we can't adjust the height, the other thing that we can do is adjust the air mix of the flame. We want to make sure that's right too. A flame should be as blue as possible. Sometimes, especially on a restored stove, you'll see flashes of orange. Those are usually impurities burning off from either re-enameling or from seasoning. That's nothing to be alarmed about. That'll burn off, and it's just, it's the same on an unrestored burner. If you light it and you see orange, you probably had a spill. When you see yellow like this, that's an indication that there is not enough air in the mix. So there are air shutters on every burner everywhere. There are air shutters. And this one is right over there. So I am going to reach in with the screwdriver and adjust the air shutter. So and see if I can get that flame to be less yellow. Okay, this is tricky to show on camera, but I do want to give you an idea of what I'm doing. So in order to adjust the air mix so that I can calibrate the oven burner, what you do is you loosen this screw just a little, and then since it's hard to get your hand in there on this model, you use your screwdriver to push the air shutter open a little. And then we're going to look back at the flame and see if the yellow's gone away. Remember, too much yellow yellow in a flame means not enough oxygen. If the flame becomes really wild and erratic and starts floating away from the burner, that's too much oxygen. So yellow, not enough. Blue and floating and wild and roaring, too much oxygen. So I want to find the right mix. And here, let me zoom back out. And there, that yellow's gone away. We're getting little flashes of orange because this is a freshly seasoned burner. We've got a pilot that's good, solid, 1/2 inch. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn all this off so I can put the pilot back in where it belongs. So that because we're no longer we no longer need to check the height, and then I'm going to put it all back together. And we'll make sure that the thermostat is set to be the correct temperature. But you have to take care of the oven burner first, because if your pilot is off and your oven burner is off, then you won't get accurate readings for your thermostat. So we'll do that right now. Let me cut here, and I'll rejoin you with a solid oven. Okay, well, 2 temperature readings later, and the temperature is identical to temperature on the dial. They're both 400 degrees. And of course, it's going to fall now that I have the door open. But let's assume yours doesn't show the same temperature, but it did level off. So let's say that it said 450 instead of 400. Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to loosen the screw that holds this dial together. Now let me show you this on the dial I showed you before. So this is the dial that was from that unrestored thermostat. And you notice it has these teeth on either side. And they lock into each other. So you're going to get this so that they lock again at the right temperature. But what we're going to do is we're going to loosen the screws so that we can just pull it out a little and only turn this part. This part's going to remain right where it was. That's important because if you look inside, you see how that's not a perfect circle? It's flat here on the bottom. Well, that matches a flat part on what it's turning. That's what's actually moving. This, while it's informational, is decorative. This has no function inside. It's just telling you, hey, here's what you think about what the thermostat's doing. This is where the real work is happening, and it's right there in that flat part. So we're going to loosen this screw right here. And actually, the original manufacturer just says 4 turns. It's the original fact sheet for the thermostat. They're the oldest one I've seen, which is from the 30s. So we're just going to loosen that a little, just enough so that we can separate the two, but not take this all the way off. So see, now I can move that, push it in a little closer to the pointer, pull this out as far as I can go. but I'm not letting this move. So let's say that it was 400 degrees on the thermometer, but my oven thermometer was set to 450. Pull this out, turn it so that the pointer is pointing to the temperature that I saw on the thermostat, that I saw on the thermometer. Lock it in. Now, temperature fluctuations of 10 to 15 degrees are considered normal. There you go. Holding that nice and tight, turning the screw. So that's all you do. You take this a little bit loose. You loosen this just a little so that you can turn the temperature dial only, and then lock it back in with the finger grip, and then tighten the whole thing back up to the housing. And this part's true whether you have a model A, B, C, or D. They all calibrate the same. Where you find the pilot adjustment will be a little different. How you adjust the burner height will be a little different. Air shutters are always the same. They're the same on all vintage stoves. And they have little design differences, but you're always going to be moving an air shutter to get as blue as a flame as possible. I don't worry about orange. Orange will bake itself off. Yellow is an issue. We want to get rid of the yellow. So you get your pilot to the right height. Make sure your burner height is the right height. The bypass cannot be adjusted because it's fixed bypass, as I've said a few times. And then we just adjust the temperature dial to match what our good oven thermometer says after 2 readings so that we make sure it's nice and level. So just one quick note about the accuracy of these thermostats. The original manufacturing sheet does say 10 degrees. I personally go with 10 to 15 degrees fluctuation. Since that is a steady heat and an even heat, and a well-diffused heat, it's still way better than anything you're getting on a modern stove. But the one thing to note is that even though the temperature dial goes down to 250 degrees and even lower, according to Rex Bakel, who again is the guy I trust most on these types of thermostats, they are not accurate below 275, even when they are freshly rebuilt. So 275 is your minimum temperature, even though the dial does go lower. And that's that slow setting. So for the early history on these, I want to thank a blog post written by the author of Brady's Bunch, Lorain County History. The author wrote several articles about the American Stove Company and Lorain thermostats in 2016, and found articles about the thermostat from 1922. These are still the best sources I've been able to find on the earliest history of the Lorain. There's advertisements, and we can glean a lot from them, but actual articles on a more business level, that's thanks to that blog post. I'll link to that as well, and of course give you Rex's information so that you can get a hold of him if you need your thermostat rebuilt. If you need it calibrated, you know what to do now. You're all set. You need a wrench, you need some time, you need a good oven thermometer, and a screwdriver to make sure you've got the right air setting, and then you're good to go. 100 years later, there's no reason why these can't be cooking your Thanksgiving dinner this year. Thanks, and I'll see you soon on the Chambers Rescue Channel.